that song. And I just think of the powerful words that were said. Several people who were standing there talking. One of his fishing buddies that came down from the group that always went to Cherokee, and he made a statement, and you hear it many times, but he made a statement of confidence. He said, if anyone ever walked the face of the earth is granted heaven, and it'd be Lenny Freeze. And just a genuine gentleman and song leader, servant, teacher of a lot of the kids' classes there at Broad Street. Going to be missed in that community at Broad Street. But he's won the victory. He's sung this song right on into his rest. And tonight's thoughts are hopefully something maybe in some way to equip you, and they're not original to me. Many times in research, even what was shared this morning, as Elliot was saying about all the thoughts and stuff, through years and through research, and a lot of times I'll borrow ideas from individuals, but if it's pretty much an outline, I'm going to give credit. In this one, Joe Williams shared, and it just caught me as something that would be beneficial for all of us to hear. He introduced it by talking about the occurrence toward the end of June into July the 10th of this year. And some of you may immediately know what that is. If you remember, there were 12 Thai boys and a 25-year-old coach. The boys were a member of an academy team that was traveling called the Mupa, or the Wild Boars. And they were trapped in the Tam Luang Cave in the Da Nang Non mountain range on the 23rd of June. It's a 6-mile cave. They went into the cave before the monsoon rains had really begun and started. At some point, the rains so flooded that it was impossible to access. The only entrance was 2 miles of narrow flooded passageways separated by the refuge from the main entrance. Efforts to pump water out couldn't keep up with the monsoon rains, so another particular thing had to be done. See, because there are rescue requirements. What happens when you make the wrong choice? Everybody gave this coach, and maybe rightfully so, a great deal of what in the world were you thinking? Taking all these boys into this dangerous situation. What you've got to remember is at the time that was entered in, the monsoon rains as they came up out of nowhere. They weren't planned. So this was not one of those things where he was figuring we can get in and get out before it happens. He wasn't making, at the time, it seemed like an interesting, educational, incredible opportunity for these young men he had on this journey. That is until the rain started. And all of a sudden, there's some things that happened that were obviously something that someone else would have to do. They had to make sure in that particular environment, because they were finally realized that that's where they were, and several things had to take place to make sure that these 12 young men and the 25-year-old coach was rescued. We'll share those with you and then challenge you with something as Joe did with us. Number one, what happens is they were in a serious and grave condition. Some would say it was partly by choice. Part of it was by circumstances. And because of the choice that they made to go into the cave and then the ensuing rains that came and then it flooded, there was no way to get out of the situation that they were in. Nothing that they could do, realizing as they had crawled back through that 2-mile tunnel to get to where they were back into the back 6-mile section of the cave. Number two, they needed help. They couldn't get themselves out of this situation. Nothing that they could do at that moment would remedy this difficult situation that they were in. Some of the boys, as has been shared later, and even the reason later of one of them even attempting, but realized none of them would be able to make the journey with the situation the way it was. They had to rely on the rescuer's plan. And here's that moment where they're in the cave, have no idea what's going on outside, and then just for 18 days, Not all of them 18 days. Some were taken out, I think 16 days, 17, because they were taken out at intervals during the time. But for 18 days, most of them were having to rely on someone else's ingenuity, someone else's creativity, someone else's ability to take them out of this difficult situation that they had gotten into. And there wasn't a thing they could do to contribute to suggest there was no communication for them to get with individuals who were outside trying to rescue them. When that plan took place, one of the things that was discussed in a couple of the articles that I read was what you've got to remember is these boys ranging in age from 11 to 16, many of whom could not swim, and let alone had never had any kind of dealing with any kind of scuba gear or what the apparatus that would be needed to save them. Once they got in and started getting them ready and having to tell them and speak to them very carefully what they had to do and the ways that they had to listen, and they had to do everything that they were told exactly as they were told. They had to keep the mask on. They had to breathe in a certain way so as not to exhaust the source of oxygen as they were coming out. All of that absolutely meant, number two, they had to put something on that they had never worn before. They didn't understand. Didn't make any sense to them, but they were being told, this will save you if you'll simply do what we're telling you to do. The unfortunate result, it's amazing what they said with the 2-mile small tunnel that had to be navigated to get back to these individuals, that this only happened once. But one of the rescuers died as a result of trying to save these 13 individuals. I know some of you are probably way ahead of me. Thinking about the application of this particular scenario to where we were maybe at one time or where we know of somebody might be. Because you hear all the discussions or all the disclaimers or all the observations, well, but this and that, but there are some very powerful truths that occurred because of this rescue situation that are actually true spiritually. Flip with me, if you would, for a moment to Psalm 144. I want to read that psalm as David kind of shares some of the thoughts that we sang about. It was really cool as we were singing while you're turning to Psalm 144. And notice, anywhere with Jesus I will safely go. Anywhere he leads me in this world below. Learning to trust Jesus or someone in that regard. To be with me, Lord, I cannot live without you. I cannot bear, one single step alone. I cannot, do. And then guide me, O thou great Jehovah. Right? Perfect songs. Because there comes a moment in time when you don't know what you need to do to be placed into a safe situation or a safe place. Somebody else does that you don't know. These 12 boys had never met the rescuers. All they know that all of a sudden these guys in scuba gear are popping up into the cave where they are. And they're bringing them an opportunity to be rescued from this dire situation. David says it this way: blessed be the Lord my rock, who trains my hands for war, my fingers for battle, my loving kindness and my fortress, my high tower, my deliverer, my shield, and the one in whom I take refuge, who subdues the people under me. Lord, what is man that you take knowledge of him, or the son of man that you're mindful of him? Man is like a breath, his days like a passing shadow. Bow down your heavens, O Lord, and come down. Touch the mountains, and they shall smoke. Flash forth lightning and scatter them. Shoot your arrows and destroy them. Stretch out your hand from above. Rescue me and deliver me out of the great waters. From the hand of foreigners whose mouths lying words, whose right hand is the right hand of falsehood. I will sing a new song to you, O God, on a harp of 10 strings. I will sing praises to you. The one who gives salvation to kings, who delivers David his servant from the deadly sword. Rescue me and deliver me from the hand of foreigners, whose mouth speaks lying words, and whose right hand is the right hand of falsehood, that our sons may be as plants grown up in their youth, that our daughters may be as pillars sculptured in palace style, that our barns may be full, supplying all kinds of produce, that our sheep may bring forth thousands and 10,000s in our fields, that our oxen may be well laden, that there be no breaking in our going out, that there be no outcry in our streets. Happy are the people who are in such a state. Happy are the people whose God is the Lord, the rescuer. God is the one who will provide the right path. He'll provide the right process. He'll provide the right power to do what needs to be done. But we've absolutely got to trust Him. And when it comes to being in the situation similar to what the boys were, it says this at 18 days they were there. Do we need to be rescued? We are all in a serious and grave condition. That is the situation of sin. Sometimes that's been by choice. Sometimes that's been by, even as we prayed earlier, sometimes even with the best of intentions, we don't choose to do the right thing or choose maybe to do the wrong thing. We are all needing help and intervention. We cannot save ourselves. If there is something that we need to share with the vast majority of humanity today, one of Satan's greatest weapons in the United States of America is our self-sufficiency.
That's right.
We have way too many of us that believe that we can figure it out, that we can do it on our own. That it's by enough right things that overcome the wrong things, or it's enough good attitude that gets rid of the bad attitude. It's not a balancing act. Romans 3:23 says all of us are in the same boat at the end of it as we're in the beginning of time. We are all sinners, short of the grace of God. And the realization of that, and to know beyond any shadow of a doubt, there's not one thing in the world that we can do to change that. That is until an individual decided to come where we were. See, all the plan would have just, it could have been a great plan. And I can imagine there were several, I haven't done the research, but I'm sure there were all kinds of various alternatives. Of course, the initial alternative was we're going to try to pump the water out. You can't beat Mother Nature. It was going in faster than they could try to pump it out. And no end of the potential rainstorm was in sight. And they did not know. The greater concern was, well, why didn't you just wait till all the rains quit and the water subsided? 18 days with a limited amount of food that they had in there and no way to get anything to them. But all the alternative ways that individuals are trying to get them in there, all of man's devising. And finally, an individual realized, hey, we can go in and we can bring them out, but we're going to have to do it very carefully, and it's going to have to be done methodically, and there's only a very simple but well-detailed plan as to how that'll take place. We have to rely on the rescue plan of God. It's the will of God that all be saved. 1 Peter says that God wants all, and He makes that a possibility. But all 12, in fact 13 being the coach himself, the only way they got out of that dire, difficult, deadly situation was by doing exactly what they were told by the rescuer. I've never done that before. I don't know what that is. I don't understand the scuba gear, the apparatus, the tank, the oxygen. I don't understand that I've got to keep it on, and if I take it off while we're in the water, that I'm going to be... all of those particulars of that. And the same thing is true when you tell individuals, well, there's a way God has decided for you to have a relationship with Him. There's a signature moment where that we have to put something on, and it's Christ. Galatians 3, Romans 6, Galatians 2:20, 1 Peter 3, and all those particular passages that talk about, you mean that for me to have a relationship with God, that that I respond to Him in an obedient faith, that I submit to Him by a penitent heart, and that I'm entered into the watery grave of baptism, and somehow that's going to save me. That's what Peter says. Account that it's not the water, of course, it's the blood of Christ. There's no doubt about that. That's the medium that Jesus chose to use, that God in His wisdom decided to use. The difference in this last thought and the rescue of the boys is that the death of the individual wasn't the thing that made the signature difference in those who were being rescued. It does with us. Because the individual who died for us died instead of us. But the fact that what that indicates in a very, very grave way is that everyone, I didn't look at the number of individuals, the number of rescuers that went through those tunnels. That 2 mile, it's a 4 mile round trip. 2 miles in through the tunnels, into the cave, 2 miles back. And for each one of the individuals, a person had to take the chance of losing his, and I'm not sure, I want to be accurate about this, it may have been her life as well as divers. I think it was a gentleman, but I'm not sure. The willingness to give their life. That's what Jesus did on Calvary for us. You see, we need to be rescued. We know individuals who need to be rescued. My hope in these thoughts, and when Joe shared this, I thought, wow, when you think of the way that this occurred in that situation back at the end of June and July, and you look at our situation and you look at the situation of those that we love. One of the things that Cynthia said in just a moment as I was just visiting her going through the line was what it's meant that so many individuals have touched base with them, and that Lenny's life has touched so many individuals. And that they were so appreciative of the number of folks who continued to pray for them. But the prayers in that case with Lenny weren't for rescue, but they were for rest. You or I, at any given moment in our life, may not realize that we're in need of rescue. One of the things I think we've got to be a little bit more assertive about is, but though at this very moment, and I've said this before in the months past, you right now most likely know someone who is. That probably doesn't realize that they're in a dangerous place or they're making dangerous decisions. Are you willing to be the individual that will try to rescue them? The immediate discussion that comes up, but what if I step into a situation like that and I'm getting ready to tell someone, hey, you're in a dangerous place, then I'm judging them. Well, you are. In one sense, you are making a judgment. But I know that there are 12 young men and adolescents, 13 young men that are glad somebody made a judgment. Here's something that has to be done. They cannot help themselves. We've got to do something. Gratitude beyond measure for individuals who risk their lives. See, that's not, Jesus doesn't ask us in that sense to risk our lives. Sometimes it's maybe risking a relationship. Maybe sometimes it's risking some other level of communication or family situation. But if we're not willing to risk that for someone's life, are we genuinely doing what God did for us, knowing our lost state and wanting to send His Son into? I love the one phrase as we were singing the song, that He leadeth me beside waters still and troubled sea. He'll lead us through it to one day be in His presence. as I thought about that, and of course the water image that's kind of been all through this whole thing with the rescue, the way that it occurred, in Revelation, there's this transition in the book, and then I think again I've shared this before as well. When you start the book, the vision that John sees, there's the throne of God, and there's this sea of glass that is between John and God. Midway through the book, at one point I can remember the exact chapter, but about midway through the book, somehow John's vision changes, and he's actually standing on the sea, and he's at the throne room. Toward the end of the book of Revelation, I think it's in 21, John says there is no more sea. That the separation from God is gone. No matter where you may be this evening, if you are by some situation separated from God, He wants to be reunited. He wants to be with you and wants you to be with Him. So if there's some need of rescue in that regard, we're here to assist with that tonight, just as we talked about tonight. Simple, New Testament responsive, penitent faith, confession, and baptism into a relationship with Him. Or if there's some struggle that's separating you and that you need to share and maybe someone can assist with, any way we can help, would you come while we stand and while we sing?